Welcome to the voice of mountain sledding, the Mountain Sledder Podcast with Mike Reed.
Brad Gilmore, thanks so much for joining us on today's podcast, The Mountain Sledder. This is awesome to have you.
This is so good, Mike. When I seen your post with Nadine and Cody, just the two podcasts, I was like, holy man. Like,
we were mentioning you. Your name came up quite a few times in those.
The first one I listened to was with Nadine because I was like, this is amazing. And then like all of a sudden my name, I'm just laying in bed listening to it. I was like, oh, what? I was like, oh.
And we were referencing you because last year Nadine put out a kick-ass segment where she was doing these burly drops up on Boulder that are very iconic. And they're very iconic because guys like you a decade before her were hitting these and just sniping, just like she did with deep snow and blue skies and the perfect conditions. You guys were hitting those quite a few years ago.
It was, it's crazy to say it's a decade, man. And the decade before that, it was Robbie and the boys.
Yeah. But, isn't it crazy to think that it was that long ago? And it's cool to see like Diener, who is, a big part of our crew for so many years and still is still sending those things.
She's on another level. Like, it's so consistent and so talented, and very humble. Like, some of the things you see her doing, you're like, well, boys, better get it together.
Here's the duct tape. Put it around your throttle and see what you can do here. Hang on.
Try a little harder to keep up to
her. So where are you at these days? You're down in Squamish?
Yeah. Just residing in Squamish, man, and spend most of my time here. A bit of time in Pemberton, and then kind of running the corridor. Shop trucking. Pretty much try and stay Squamish north. Don't try and head too south. It's a little too busy.
It gets too busy down there, especially if you're driving like an F550 or some sort of big field truck like that.
Yeah, it's a little hectic. Try and keep it as local as possible, man.
So you're living in Squamish and you're running, you got your own operation for doing mechanics?
Yeah, just lone contractor. Got one pretty solid client, very forestry based, some smaller civil stuff, a lot of road building. So by he's probably knocking on 40 pieces of gear, and then a couple other small guys.
Big heavy equipment.
I stay busy. Heavy. Yeah, for the most part. For the forestry side of things, very large. Is pretty much as burly as it gets. Which is I appreciate it so much. It's such it's nice iron to work on. There's good space. It's not as complex as like some fancy excavator digging trench line for here to Alberta.
How is owning your own business? It's got to be all over the place.
It's all over the place, man. These are the last couple of years have been obviously, as anyone knows with business, it takes a few years to kind of get to a point where you're comfortable and B, into it. Like, is this what I want to do? It's hectic. One guy in a shop truck, which as anyone knows, one guy at a business is a lot, man. And especially as a field tech too, right? Like, you don't have hours, you start and you hopefully get to come back at a decent time.
So you're juggling that. Plus you got a young fella, so family life and business life and trying to juggle it all.
Yeah, try and juggle it all, man. 10-year-old boy and business, trying to have your own life, and gym and some routine and everything else. Anyone knows, man, like time becomes valuable and it's also hard to shuffle.
Having your own life, does that include sled time, or what are you doing on a sled these days?
A little bit of sled time. I try and, I call it like, if I don't get out twice a year, I'm a little upset with myself. I think last year it been twice. maybe 3 times. I can't remember.
I remember in your pinnacle of riding the Slednecks days when we come out filming, if you didn't ride twice in a week, you'd be upset. Now it's twice in a season.
That one year, man, I think that 2011, it had to have had 8,000K on it, 7,000K. Like, it was a big year. And even those, when I went back and I was, working split shift with finning, I would still do like 45,000 or 40,000. That'd be nice. 4,500K a season. Yeah.
And that's like, for listeners, is like, oh, well, I've done that in a season. Well, in the corridor or a lot of these areas, you're not riding like 100K or 50K one-way trail. It's like you're into the Alpine and you're there.
Yeah, like a 15-kilometer trail, like it's a long trail.
That means you're racking up a lot of backcountry miles.
That's a lot of hours, man. Yeah, like I would take off, when I was, the winter off when I first started filming for Slednecks, I was off for 4 months. I didn't work a day. That's all I did was ride.
Your work was riding, filming.
My work was riding. That was it, man. That year was, I gave up 8 months of life. I just went to the Yukon. I worked. I would come out for 5 days. I would just spend nothing. And then I'd go back in. And when I came out in November, brand new sled, pocket full of cash, zero debt.
Ready to ride.
I was ready.
You took it seriously. But it takes that commitment though to get to that level.
It took that, man. Yeah, for sure. And those were that was a humbling year for me, but I did exactly what I wanted to do. And looking back at it, I had a lot of goals, and I look back, I think I met all of them, but my biggest one was I will be in a Slednecks film.
You did it.
And I did it. I did it. And that was hard work, man. Yeah.
It wasn't just because you knew the right person or whatever. Your riding was at that level.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That was everything I had, man. And I look back and it's I didn't hold anything back. I tried, I gave up a lot and I worked for it. And it worked out, and then after that, I kind of felt, once I was back working and able to take off days, I'd come down, we'd go to Revelstoke for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
I'd ride 18 days out of 21, it was a couple days of travel. Those are big weeks.
Big
man.
commitment. Yeah. This episode of the Mountain Sledder Podcast is brought to you by Mountain Sports Distribution and ShopMSD.com, your source for top brands in sledding and powersports. From 509 to Highmark, Tobe to CFR, and their exclusive line of Mountain Lab gear, MSD is where you can find products tailored to meet the needs of serious backcountry powersports users. Mountain Sports Distribution has constantly been expanding their line of products each year, and I always look forward to what comes out next. From a custom Mountain Lab toolkit which contains everything needed no matter what brand you ride, to super bright headlamps and even gear bags and tie-downs, any outerwear and safety gear you need for riding, basically everything you'll need in a day of riding, you'll find at shopmsd.com. Upgrade your riding experience this season by visiting shopmsd.com. Top quality brands for your backcountry adventures.
I just got caught in this drainage and I was like, it'll come out. We'll be fine. There's got to be something there. And I remember just getting down and looking up being like, oh boy. I think Robbie filmed this whole segment that day while I was stuck in the trees.
Yeah, we filmed a good portion of that, didn't we? So,
yeah.
So Brad Gilmore leaves the coast, heads to the interior. One of his first experiences is extremely deep snow riding with Rob Alford, who is so experienced in that snow condition.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
But he did something similar to you, as he started out west and then he went to the interior too, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was. I didn't know Robbie then. I met him in Revelstoke, but obviously heard of him lots as being a young kid in Pemberton, and Robbie and Cody and Geoff, those guys were always around. But yeah, no, he was. I'm assuming it would have been 2005 maybe 03. Rob would have headed to the interior.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Yeah.
Yeah.
About that.
Yeah. So he was obviously just chasing good snow, which, man, you can't blame him.
And why wouldn't you? And then that place he set up before the market turned so crazy. I mean, I can't talk to you about market because you're living in Squamish, but the market in Revelstoke got crazy too. And he got in well before all that. And the place he has set up is just unreal.
Oh, the chalet is amazing. Yeah, we spent a few nights there.
So that was, we were all filming for Slednecks then. And you're right. I think the amount of snow that we had just lent itself to filming an epic amount of basically rider segments in a short period of time because the weather was cooperating and the snow was unreal. And
those, December, January, into February, you can't really plan too much. You don't really know if you're going to make it to the Alpine. Some of those days, some of Turtle and heading back at Keystone and into Sail, I guess I'd be out there towards the dam. Yeah. How many days would we spend breaking trail? And you just you punch further, and it's you guys on 46s, 53s, 55s. It's very rarely was there a 65 in the group.
That's right.
You would work hard to make it back, and then you just get in. You'd be like, well, I don't know, got gas? A little bit. Try and get something done.
It's funny you mention that because I see a huge trend in sleds today where the 65s. Are almost as playful as the 46s used to be.
Totally.
Because of the power, the type of chassis, just the rideability, the ergonomics of it, allow it to be way more playful.
Yeah, I think kind of if you were to put them side by side, there's got to be something to do with the skid compared to where you stand and where we used to stand. I don't know, because like a 55, even on my last couple of years on cat, like a 55 didn't feel that long, but I remember going from like a 121, like a race chassis, to a 54 XP, and just like you feel like you're kind of looking behind you, like what am I bringing with me?
A station wagon.
Yeah, 100%.
Throw the whole family on
you
there.
Just a bit. The acceleration throughout the years of track transitions was amazing, right? Like I didn't have long tracks. Like the longest track I ever had before I went to a 55 was a 36.
Right.
You're like, oh yeah. Now it's like you see these guys on 65s, period, and they're just like upside down, sideways, cranky here or there. You're like, huh, cool.
So you go to the interior and you start linking up with guys like Turcotte, because we did a couple of segments with Turcotte that was involved too. And we mentioned some of the drops Nadine was doing in her last year's 509 segment, were the same ones you lined up in Revelstoke. Yeah. And I remember those days when we were filming some of those, and you were hitting some pretty big drops with Turcotte and all that. Yeah. And I think like that era was, you guys were definitely pushing each other.
We were, for sure. We would, the camaraderie between us, we'd feed off, someone would, throw, like Brett was, oh man, Brett's riding is contagious, right? Like, as we all know. And, when you see something happen, you're like, wow, I got to do that too, and Dan was really good too. Dan would come out, we'd have a few days there too. And he was always, his eye, just that skiing eye, man, he'd piece things together. You're like, that was amazing, so that continuous push to find something that much bigger and or that much more technical was always there.
He was very creative, wasn't he? From like, it seemed creative from a sledder's aspect, but from a skier's, they like all skiers are probably saying, well, yeah, why wouldn't you look at it that way?
Yeah. Oh, exactly. But to me, it's like, well, why? At that point, like I remember just everything had a takeoff, and you were lined up, and you'd line up like 3 sled lengths behind you,
right?
And then you just get Dan in there, and he was he'd throw a good chirp at you. He'd be like, why don't you just hit it, or why don't you just come?
What are you waiting for?
You're like, well, I don't know. That was good. I look back at those days, man, where you just as the day went on, you're like, man, we just punched out like 15 good shots, It took one person to make one move, and then that was it. It was game on. Just always looking for something.
We talked to KJ recently on the podcast, and another West Coast native there that was, going hard through the 2000s when you guys were coming up. Yeah. And who, I guess, like to me, he had such a big style where it was just like, he wouldn't just do a whip. He would do a whip like 20 feet off the deck and then hang it out for the longest time and then land. Like,
that guy would take everything just that much further, like if you think back to like his opening shot in Slednecks 13, you're like, what? Like how fast can you hit something?
Huge.
Like, well, huge, big power, like obviously he was running turbo for a few years, or he would just another level, of how high and how far could you go.
So now, stock turbos are all the rage, and most riders are on them, but do you think that's what lent him to allow him to hit that next transition to get that much farther than a lot of riders? He was on a turbo the whole time, essentially.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the ability to maintain speed and carry that momentum, through the lip, especially on a deep day, you'll come in as hot as you can, but then you'll just kind of plow into it. Where I think the turbo, you can kind of roll a bit more, and then kind of like almost like a ramp, Brett would say, you can accelerate throughout it, and then it's there. You got the track speed at the lip, where I never had that.
So many riders
just come in as hot as possible, and then like, that didn't work.
But it's funny, like, so last year players launched the 9R, which is and naturally aspirated, cool motor, all that sort of stuff. But the year before, they'd launched the turbo. So it was the turbo, then the 9R came out, and so many riders went, you know what? I'm going to do this 9R. Like, what a cool backcountry weapon. It's going to be so snappy and all this. Well, in those deep days that you're describing where you need that extra, 20, 30, 40 horsepower.
Totally, yeah.
The 9, it's funny that the NA sleds just aren't there. Like, no matter how you do porting and polishing, you do pipes on it, you do all these sorts of things, and it's like, it still isn't a turbo at altitude.
No, for sure. The ability to have that force induction, like, and carry it, right? You're not going to, once it's spooled up, it's not going to unspool itself unless you let the throttle off, right? It's just the way it is. Like we would, spend time with, tuning and heads and pipes and Y pipes and anything we could do to just squeak that much more, whether realistically at, 7,000 feet, it might have only been stock advertised horsepower.
Right.
But to get a mod sled right out of the box with, borderline warranty, I don't know how far it gets you, but it's got to have some sort of warranty.
I think it does. Yeah. They're just like a normal sled.
Yeah. No, I don't know, man. I feel like I've kind of ripped myself off. Like I should have started like 5 years ago. Now I get to ride these sleds.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. So you watch everyone now on social media and you see what they're doing, and you're just like, you didn't know how many struggles we had to try and get there.
Oh man!
But in saying that, before you, there was trailing arm guys doing it. Like the Jay Quinlans, and we always mention these guys in podcasts. They always come up because it's just like, imagine if you had the iron that the current guys have, but imagine they had what like that's 2 generations ago.
Oh man, you look at Rob and Cody. Obviously, some people understand what I'm talking about. But the Rutherford gas drop, which is a very well-known drop that'll send you as far as you want. Like those guys did it on ZX chassis with no bar risers.
No bar risers and very rudimentary suspension. Like nowadays we're like tuning to the nth degree as if we were like
it's a dirt bike, man.
Yeah. We were Blair Morgan back in the day. Like that's what he would have been running on that program race team.
What a legend. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So and now we're finally getting that in the backcountry. Like we're adding suspension that they were able to get on a factory team now in the backcountry. And it's just like that didn't exist back then.
No, it didn't. No, it really didn't. Like you remember going from the ZX to a Rev chassis?
Yeah.
Do you remember?
Big jump.
Oh man, like big jump, jump. Like that was a big progressionary part of the sport, man. Like
the biggest thing I found was like that belly pan and everything felt so wide, and it was kind of just like floating through the snow, but you were like in the snow.
Yeah.
And then you go to the Rev and it felt like you were finally like not dragging half the mountain with you when you're touring around.
For sure. And even the Rev chassis, when you look back at it, like the running boards are still really low.
Yeah.
But it was so much better. And super wide. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, like your ski stance was like your tunnel width.
But those sleds moved and they got, they changed the progression and started pushing the rider ergonomics forward. And I think it just
having the handlebars, in line with your chest, you're able to actually have elbows up, it was more of like a dirt bike, I kind of felt, where Ski-Doos managed to carry that still now, right? Where the post is over the engine. It's got that inline feeling.
Have you been on any of the new sleds recently?
I've ridden a 9R, and I've rode. I spent quite a bit of time on the Chaos chassis, just because with Andrew and Backcountry. So, pretty fortunate enough, man, that he did flash up once he left Mountain Motorsports.
Yep.
And so
Andrew he's a buddy of yours, close buddy.
He's a good friend of mine. Yeah,
and he runs the dealership out in Pemberton.
Yeah. He started like when my first year with Slednecks, for Slednecks 14, I was on that would have been a 2011 HCR, so the older M chassis before they went to the new one, and then a couple of years there, and then when I moved to Fernie, I transferred my sponsor essentially to Mountain Motorsports with Aaron, and then Andrew actually worked for Aaron for a couple of years, and recently, I guess he's got to be 4 or 5 years into business now. Moved back, Pemberton, flashed up Polaris dealership. I'm really surprised that he actually still loans me sleds for the day.
Last time I talked to him, he was very excited about how well you're still riding when he gives you the loaners. He couldn't believe it. He's like, Brad just hopped on, and it was just like he never left.
It's so true. I actually think I might be better now than I was then. The sleds are better.
You want to hear a funny story? Last time I was in Whistler, I called up Andrew and we went out for dinner, and he was so excited. We just went for pizza or whatever, like something simple in the village. And he was so excited because I was his first expensed dinner at the new dealership. He was so stoked. He's like, I'm buying tonight because this is it. Yeah. So he's going strong out there. It's so cool to see. So you're able to get on some new models through him. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was good. I think that was last spring. We had like a full, like what we call a demo ride, right? And it was Tyler Blair, myself, Andrew. Like
he told me about this. So you and Tyler Blair come out of the woodworks, dust off the cobwebs, and he was kind of describing. He's like, you wouldn't believe it. Like Brad went up this climb, and then he like just started sniping off these drops, and people couldn't believe it. And I'm like, well, if you're gonna demo a sled and what it's capable of, put some good riders on it.
Yeah, totally. It was so good. We just kind of roll into like the Ogre Lake drainage, and I mean, you got one where you kind of head back towards Owl Lakes, and then you would head in, and there's a wind lip there. I want to say KJ maybe hit it for the forecast segment like years ago.
Yearly's Films,
yeah, Yearly's Films, and I went up and I rolled over it. I was like, oh man, like this works. I went down, made sure it was okay with the boss. And I'm like, hey man, you mind if I hit that? And Edgar's like, yeah, sure.
That's what the sleds are made for.
Yeah, it was so snipe, and had to have been like 100 feet, 110 feet. It was just like everything I had to get to. I was like, oh,
no way.
So that's like warm up head rin all year. I was like, oh. And we after we hit that, we kind of bomb it out. Sam standing there, Tyler. We kind of session for a bit, and we head up, and we roll in, and I just look, and I see this knoll. I was like, man, that might actually work. I didn't even take my backpack off, man. It hands down, Mike. It might have been the best whip I've ever done in my life.
Oh, really?
Like, yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, just full tape in and just, like, tail behind me. Just, I managed to pull off 3 of them before anybody even got the camera out.
Do you think that's because of the new chassis?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And also, man, like, I never had an 850 ever, right? And, like we're going back to earlier, like, talking about the ability to maintain that track speed. And, like, I've never had that. I mean, I probably ride a bit heavier than a lot of guys, too, right? So,
right.
To be able to have a bit more torque or track speed, it makes a difference, right? So it's not like the sled was falling out from underneath me. Like, I managed to keep it kind of rolling. So
right.
It was exciting. It was like, sweet.
And that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's
it's a sport to me that when you've put in a lot of time, it generally doesn't leave. The conditioning is the biggest part, right? Like, I'm sure going out on a deep day, I would get my butt kicked. There's no question about it. It's not that, it's not that like dirt biking and everything else doesn't keep you in good shape. But sledding is another form of conditioning. Like, we all know this. To continue to progress and to be a solid rider, like, you got to be strong, and you got to be able to put in the time to when it gets deep, and you got to get in there. Like, it'll kick the crap out of you.
There was one time where I think conditioning and hitting the gym, in my opinion, almost saved your life when you took that very scary drop, tail tap in was it? No, where was it?
It was 2013 up Owls. No, it wasn't Owls. Sorry,
it
was
Eagles.
Eagles. Yeah.
Eagles. Yeah.
Yeah. Eagles Pass.
So we were filming for, I think, Slednecks and 509 combined that day.
Slednecks 509, because Donna was there, yourself. Yeah. Brett, Brandon. That was a big crew. That was a big crew, and also that had been a big stretch too. We were filming for what, like a week straight, maybe there. Yeah. I'll never forget that, man. It changed my life. Like, there's no question about it. It changed my life, and I'm very fortunate to have walked away with, the injuries that I did have, which are a lot. Like, the list is pretty spicy.
But I don't think many people could have walked away, or even, I believe we even rode you out that day.
Oh yeah, Andrew and I rode out. Yeah. He sat like he squirreled me for a bit, and I was like, "No, that's enough." It's tandem. Oh yeah, no, my helmet was blown apart. I blew Derek's. Remember when I put Derek's neck brace on before I did it, and just like neck brace just shattered. Like,
thank God you
had
had
to
it on.
Oh, thank God, man. Yeah. Which later. I think it was, probably 5 weeks, 6 weeks after, and I was really struggling with my shoulder, and they finally gave me a CT scan. It turned out my neck was broken, and it's crazy. But I honestly think, like, it probably saved my life, but I think the neck brace, where my neck broke, is where the neck brace was sitting, so it's hard to tell, right? Because I broke the tips off. They call it like the spinous processes, and if I'm saying that correctly, I don't know, but yeah, no doctor, but I remember reading a whole bunch because I had nothing but time at that point. I mean, I was off work for like 16 months after that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was that long.
Yeah.
So, and I'll take the viewers through like what I was viewing from the front side. You were on, like, you and Brett were sessioning this slope, which had some varying degrees difficulties of drops in it.
Totally.
And Brett, I think, come off and done one, and it was kind of sniper, and there was lots going on, and it was a committed line, meaning like you couldn't stop, set your sled, look at the land, okay, and then go. It was like committed from the top, so you had to roll down into it. And I
did that one to the left prior, that ski line down onto that knoll. And I remember Brett. Oh, you can tell.
Well, and then I was just going to say, like, then things were firing. And when you get a group like you're saying, like Brandon and Brett and you, and there's multiple filmers and everything else going on, and it's just like you're feeling good and your confidence is growing. And then there's this one line where it looked so good
So
from the
good.
bottom. But of course, the slope is slightly different all the time from different angles and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And you come off and it didn't kick you, but the lip wasn't quite enough there to kick you out far enough to clear what was under it.
Yeah, it's funny because I remember, well, I think back a lot, obviously, it's especially since this has come up, I've kind of looked back, there's some footage and some movies, but I'll never forget looking up and just being like left of the tree. Looking up, saying that it was riders right of the tree. It wasn't riders left. So I was just looking at it saying the wrong terminology, which I would never normally have done. I think it was just a lot of excitement. So I remember dropping in and kind of seeing where Brett went off. And at that point I was very committed, and I did not have the speed because the kind of had a bit of a wind lip that, ran up the spine, and Brett had kind of taken off in the pocket. And I took off, which was probably a half a sled length further back than I wanted to, and also on the wrong side. And I wanted to fall beside that cornice, not over top of it. And just not a combination of a few things, but not enough speed for one. And then, that panic rev, I can still hear it in my mind. Just like when I felt my feet coming off, I didn't know what happened, obviously. And I felt my feet coming off the tunnel, and all of a sudden you're just literally hanging on the bars. And that was it, just head first into the sled. But, man, I look back, like, good helmet, good chest protection, with the spine board, or the spine plate, whatever you'd call it. The neck brace, there's a few variables there that I truly do believe that saved my life. And also, I'm still walking, I'm still moving. I have a lot of shoulder pain, but
yeah, no doubt.
That's the way it goes. Yeah.
Did your shoulder get put back in on the mountain? Did it?
Yeah. Yourself, Brett, and Andrew.
Yeah.
We managed to get it back in, but you remember, like, after the crash, like, there was people everywhere, and they were trying to get the sat phone. They wanted to fly me out, and there was like, oh man, there had to have been 15, 20 people.
It was wild.
And like new riders cruising by, and everyone was kind of coming in, and I don't know who it was. I want to say it was Andrew. It was just like, everybody needs to leave, like, right now.
Yeah.
It was like,
stick around, but don't just be right up in her face.
Yeah. Just go away. Yeah, no, we managed. I remember almost passing out. I don't know whose back I was kind of laying on, because the shoulder actually came out the back. Like, it was a posterior, not an anterior, which they later found out with the injury that I had, which is very rare. It's generally what comes when you have an impact that pushes it out the back, doesn't yank it out the front. So it's a little different. I don't know if you remember, it was kind of lodged out. Yeah. Yep. And I pretty much like almost fainted, and then it popped in, and that was it. But there was so much damage, I didn't really feel like it was in, because there actually ended up being like a couple large tears and a few larger fractures in there that, changed how it went in and also how it felt once it was in.
So that was quite a few years ago now, and
it's 11 years, man.
Yeah, fast forward 11, over a decade later. And how are you feeling today?
Good, strong for the most part. Like, we are getting almost knocking on 40 here, man.
I know.
Like,
it's crazy to think.
I try hard, man. I really do. I try hard to maintain fitness, but old injuries catch up. And I'm also, like, as we're all guilty of it, I'm not easy on myself. I'm not easy on my body. Like, I'm still, all of a sudden, I'm just living my motocross kids dream,
I was going to say.
Country. Yeah.
Well, okay, so you're knocking on 40. Well, we both are. And you are still racing cross-country moto.
Yeah.
And doing well at it, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm trying hard, man. The last year, so it would have been 2022, I did 3 races. So 3 of the PN races, I don't know what you guys call it in Alberta, but here it's like the Pacific Northwest Series.
Yeah.
And so I did 3, did decent, I did pretty decent. I got second in 1 in merit with a pretty decent class, and then there's that one in Kamloops. Actually ended up Brett and I raced in the same class.
No way.
It's pretty fun.
So
cool. It was pretty fun. So VetX, I call it the fast dance class.
Yep.
And like, those guys are no joke, man. A lot of those VetX guys had like good amateur or good pro careers. They just kind of come out and pick and choose their
VetX would be
races.
like against Regan Sieg and all them, wouldn't it?
Oh, Regan, I think he did one in Vernon, and won a Masters race.
Yeah, he won a Masters. Yeah.
What a weapon, man! Just shows up like too good. And then and I was kind of like, I really enjoy Type 2 fun. For the most part, I call it Type 2 because you think back to like breaking trail and just like rolling sleds and just kind of suffering a bit. I always enjoyed that. So I was like, well, maybe this is for me. So last winter, I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a run at this. I'm going to build a bike. I'm going to build like a,
you took it seriously?
Totally. Yeah, I took it serious. I went and bought a brand new thumper and like suspension, recluse. Like I was like, I'm doing this. Yeah, I'm doing this. And I raced 7 out of 9 of the PN races this year.
Holy.
And I came third overall for the VEDX class. And
so you guys take like your top 7 results out of 9 races, top 6 or something. How does that work?
Yeah, exactly that, man. So I scratched one and I skipped one because I was actually I was out hunting. So they with fire season and everything that was going on, they had to shift some races. So I ended up having to pretty much miss one, which was okay because at that point it was kind of locked in.
You took this fairly seriously. I didn't know that.
I did. I did for sure. I got pretty tired. They had 3 weekends in a row that were all how did it go? I went Merritt, Kamloops, and then Lytton, I want to say.
Okay.
And I was like, I can't do it, man. God, I was beat up. The one in Merritt, it was a spicy course. I came in after lap 1, so it's a 2.5 hour cutoff for those who don't understand cross country. Like you get for an A loop, it's a 2.5 hour cut, and I came in at 2 hours 11 minutes.
Oh, you did the second lap?
I was like, you gotta be kidding me, man. Like there's no way. Anyways, went out. It was snowing. It was blowing sideways. It was miserable, man. And finished the race 4 hours 26 minutes or something.
On a bike, like, consistently.
On a bike. Yeah. No, you're.
Where did you finish? Because of you pushed to the next lap, did you at least like catch a couple guys?
I got second in that race.
Nice. Yeah, so it was worth it.
It was worth it. Yeah. I actually only had one race the whole year that I didn't come on the podium, which was the Kahuna in Kamloops, which is like kind of that. Yeah.
You're Mr. Consistent.
Yeah, I'm trying. Yeah, I can just about win. If the races were an hour and a half, I would have won a couple. I just come out of the gate swinging, right?
So is your excuse that these guys that are beating you are like half your age or what in the VEDX class?
No, there's no excuse. The guy that I lost to every race is 42. Ryan, he's just a weapon, man. I don't get it. Like I have no excuse other than I just need to be better. But he, I'd say that he was a downhill racer, a very successful one. And then he won a Masters championship, I want to say in like 2012 or 2013.
So he's no stranger to this.
He's no stranger. Yeah. Very consistent. He just shows up, you feel hunted, you like the whole time out there. I used to, when I was on a 2-stroke for a bunch of years, and then, you'd almost hear like 4-stroke whispers in your ear, like you can hear them coming, but you don't know where they are. So this year I'm like, well, I'm going thumper. Like, I don't want to be that guy, right? Or I want to be that guy that everyone's kind of nervous for. Ryan will just show up at like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, hour and 45. He just appears. And it's like, damn it.
He's just a machine.
I'm tired. Yeah, I'm tired, man. Like, get out of here.
You do this like graph where you're like strong out of the gate, and then you kind of just like, like any other human, you start getting a little bit tired, and this guy just
getting a little tired, man. Yeah. I know. I got to eat like 3,000 calories in the morning before I go out. We're like these,
because
they're like 100, 160, 170 pounds. They just have like, I don't know, a banana and they're good to go. And I'm like, man, I literally eat the fridge.
It's so funny to talk to you and like rekindle this because like I am like that BC scene for moto is like, that's where you're going to find some of the best of the best. That Kamloops region, the Okanagan, they can ride basically all year round.
They can ride, man. Yeah. Like that Kahuna race, they call it the Big Kahuna, but it's at Whispering Pine. So it's at the motocross track in Kamloops.
Okay.
And that's once a year, the band allows them to run a race throughout the whole property, right?
Oh,
so
wow.
they mix up cross country, obviously a bit of the moto track, and then they'll add in like a hard enduro course or like what would they call that? It's like just all the features, man. Like it's terrible. So you're 2 hours
like hard enduro, yeah.
It totally, or like oh man, why can't this just will not come to my mind here?
Yeah,
anyways,
even like
we'll come back to
the Red Bull. What is it called in downtown Calgary that they have at Rocks and Logs?
Same thing. But it's a good mix, man. So you get a lot of fast moto guys, which is humbling, but you'll kind of reel them back in when it gets to a bit of single track. But it's a good mix, man. And like, there's like 45 guys in a VEDX class. Like,
that's a big class.
Yeah, it's big, and they bring out some good pros too. Like Medagula's been there the last couple of years, and Tristan Hart.
Sweet.
Like some fast guys, man. So it's entertaining to see them not.
What are your times next to like Tristan's?
Oh, I don't even know, man. I don't want to admit it.
Don't even want to see his lap times.
No. Well, and this year, I want to say Medagula maybe lapped up to like third or fourth place in the Masters class. So think about that. Yeah.
And
think
those
about
are big
that.
laps.
They're like 12 to 16 minutes, depending on how fast you're moving. So like, Tristan, he didn't race. He was injured prior to that, but you mix in like Brock Hoyer and those
guys that have been around the fairly pro
they've been
scene.
around, man, and they can still hold their own. Like, see those guys like Brock's a year or two younger than you and I, and like still like competitive. Man.
Oh yeah, he moves.
It's fun to watch, and it's when they blow by you and you're like, damn it, like I'm slacking or I'm riding like crap.
I don't know.
Like, well, are they just that much better?
I don't know if it's just us, like what it is, but there's something about, and again, like we're knocking on 40. All of a sudden, we're like, you get back into racing. I haven't raced since I was in my mid-20s, and all of a sudden I did my first cross-country race this summer.
Oh, no way.
And
where does this come from?
And you built a bike, and you start training all this. My program was I took the family out camping, and then last minute I was just like, Ty, could you bring my bike down to the track, and I'll drop the family off, drop the RV off and everything at home that morning, and then I'll quickly get down to the track as quick as I can, but just kind of have my bike somewhat ready. And I roll in, throw my gear up, go to the start line. I was a little weak because I'm not going to lie here. I was not going to do the A class.
It doesn't matter, man.
They initially had me signed up for the A, and I was just like, what business do you think I have doing a loop? Because the A and B loops for us are different, and they cut off a bunch of like the super tech areas in A. And I was just like, listen, I've been on my bike 2 or 3 times this summer. I ain't doing an A loop. First off, I'm still going to be out there days later. You guys will try and find me. So I do the B loop.
Looking for a tag.
I ended up having a blast. It was so much fun. But
oh man, I think that everybody that rides dirt bikes should experience a hare scramble or a true cross country race once in their life. Like it is another level of fun because for starters, like depends on which class you pick. Like you don't even know who you're racing.
Nope.
Until you become familiar with the guys in your class. Like you're just banging bars with strangers.
Yep.
And like it's fun, man. Like it can be terrible to the point where you're like, why am I doing this to myself? But it also
isn't that all of like cross country dirt biking though? Like to 100%. Me, that's what I feel is just like when you're doing single track, at least around here, like Grand Prairie is more like Muskogee and stuff. We have there's some dune areas and stuff, but like most of it is like a grueling endurance test. Even like a Wednesday night ride night when we go out with our buddies is like. You are sweating, and it's one of the best workouts you can get.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why you bring goggles. They're within 10 minutes. There's on the back of your alley. You're just bringing them for a ride.
That's it.
It's so true. And Squamish is a nutshell. Like it's hard enduro every time. There is some flow, but it's like, I call it Jank City, Like,
really?
It's just rocks and roots, and like it is fun. Like, you can just become this like Swiss Army knife of dirt biking, but like,
it's that difficult.
I don't know. It can be, man.
So yeah, that's super cool to hear you're still dirt biking and getting back into it.
Man.
So if people are thinking about getting into dirt biking out on the West Coast, they should look this up. And that's the style of racing, or do you think motocross is still taking the majority of the people?
Man, it's a hard call. Like we don't have that real like true motocross energy. Than like compared to the interior or the Fraser Valley even too, man. Like I've really come to realize that with my son racing that it's not like we're not the hub of motocross. Like we are a hub of cross country, and having the it's a mecca of mountain biking. Well, why can't it be the mecca of cross country dirt biking, which it kind of is, like it's got like 500 plus members, which is quite a bit for the club, and plus strangers and everybody else that roll in. And our closest motocross track is Pemberton.
Yep.
And Green River is a great track. It's just not a challenging motocross track. So if you're familiar with true moto, like the tracks rut up, they get beat up. It's by the end of the day, it's terrible. Pemberton's kind of like concrete, right? Like it doesn't hold its own quite well. Great track. Don't get me wrong. I spent a lot of time there and I do enjoy it, but you go to some other tracks, man. You go to Kelowna. We went down to Washougal last year and did a race there, and I'm like,
cool.
This is motocross. Like,
nice.
This is fun. Yeah.
So you have dabbled into actual motocross then?
Actually, I raced. I call it the slow dads class there, but it's just a bunch of sandbaggers. Really, it was a 30C, so they go A, B, and C, which kind of falls, I think all the way down to like maybe even 50s. So like my son raced like essentially like beginner 65s, and then I was like, you know what, I'm doing it. Okay, I'll race. Yeah. It was so fun, man. Like I was saying, like the track just kind of got beat up. So you're just like, you'll come into a corner, there's 10 ruts. You're like,
now you got options.
Yeah, you got options. And you're on the pegs a lot more, I find there too, where you're forced to stand, which I'm very comfortable with, and it was fun. It was super fun.
That's cool. So
yeah.
So dad and boy are both racing. How's your son doing?
Yeah, he's doing good, man. Sadly he had a crash in summer of 22. Wasn't a big crash. He swapped out, just kind of lost the front end on a wet corner, like after watering, and a kid ran into him and ended up breaking his arm, both lower bones in his arm. Oof, man, 8.5 years old, or it was like a couple days away from his 9th birthday.
Oh, wow.
Hard for me. I think it was harder on dad than it was on him. Like he was out riding his bike around and he came back and I was kind of looking at his arm, and kids are just elastic bands, right? So they actually call them like green stick fractures, where the bones don't really break, they just kind of bend. And looking at his, it's crazy, man. I'm so jealous. And
I want my bones to bend.
Oh man, I was just looking at his arm and I was like, we should really go get that x-ray. Like, does it hurt? And I remember the first aid guy squeezed it and he's like, that's broken. I was like, oh man. So he did try. I'll give him all that, man. Like he tried coming back, but he was really nervous after. And man, I don't blame him, right? Yep. Like that's a big injury for an 8-year-old kid. He's taking a bit of a break, man, but he's a great little rider. His posture and his form and everything is on point. He just, after being off for a bit and coming back, like you don't realize how fast kids learn until you're away for 3 months, 4 months, and you come back and all the kids you were competitive with, racing with, are just like all of a sudden you're like, ooh.
It develops quick, doesn't it?
It develops.
It doesn't matter
quick,
if you're
man.
in soccer, basketball, baseball, whatever. It's
true.
like,
yeah, progression is amazing, man. It's like one of my favorite things, and like I love it. I love progression in all aspects, man. Sport and life, this and that. But like, kids' progression is another level. Like how fast, like these kids can barely touch at the beginning of the season, and by the end of it, they're flat-footed and like sending it. You're like, wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and just to try and keep up at that rate when you have such a population like you do the West Coast and the Fraser Valley is like, you're not like going up against people in like Fort St. John or Northern Alberta or whatever, where you get like a good group of a dozen quick kids. It's just like all of a sudden you're thrown in this pool with like what could be thousands potentially of fast kids that you're just
totally. There's and there's a little hub too, right? Like kind of coming back to that, like that Fraser Valley hub, like those kids, man, like they got, for instance, they got Mission Raceway, which I sadly I think they just lost it. But the motocross track, there's like just a sand track that these kids are able to ride. So Tuesday nights they have like these, it's like a toonie race almost, and they get to go out. Yeah, oh man, it's fun. Amazing, so fun. Yeah, that helps, man. Like you get to essentially bang bars like on your week off or your months off. You're out racing and like you come back and it's cool, man. I do, when he was really into it, I was like questioning moving, I was like, I'm in, I'm all in.
You're that dad, you're the moto dad. What dedication.
I was like, you know what, man, if you're 100% in, I'm 100% in.
Wild.
He's like, I'm like 50. You're like, wow, okay. I guess we'll see.
Did you get to do anything like that, like around motorsports when you were growing up, or how did you get into sledding in such a big way?
Yeah, so I raced a little bit, which is now 85cc, but I did 2 seasons, maybe like a total of like 6 races on 80s when I was probably like 12 and 13. But like I grew up playing hockey, so and my dad was a career faller, so he was gone a lot, right? Like a lot of camps, a lot of time on the West Coast. So it didn't really have the option, man. Like it was, we always had a snowmobile. My dad called it the babysitter. Leave your mom alone, go ride the sled. Yeah, just like there's three of us, right? And I'm the oldest of three, and me and my brothers are only like a year and change apart. So like I can't imagine what we were like as kids thinking back. But yeah, like dirt bikes are always a part of our lives. It was never, I never did really start riding a pile till my adult life, right? Till I could afford to do it myself because my parents weren't going to fund it.
No.
But yeah, sleds, man, like going back. My dad had like would have been like an EX 440, like a Yamaha, like a 78 or 79, which we rode that a bit, but like I was, as like a 7-year-old kid, that was pretty sporty.
Oh yeah, for sure. They had a lot of power.
I'll never, yeah, they did, right? Well, back then they did. But I'll never forget it, man. I remember Al Bush, owner of Valley Chainsaw, the Skidoo dealership in Pemberton.
Yeah.
We were getting off the bus and he was rolling in to drop something off and he just whistled at us. And he's like, "Hey, you guys, come over here." I was like, "What's Al got?" Came over, but my dad had bought us, it was a 1989 Elan, so like a 250 single lung Elan. It was a
no suspension.
It was like bogies, man.
Yep, that's it.
Bogies across the board. And that's what we had, man.
We awesome.
Rode those. I rode that for years until your buddies are ripping around on Skandics, and I remember when one of them had, it was amazing, man. It was like a Skandic platform with like a 670X motor in it. Like
big mod sled.
A big mod sled. And it had like some ape hangers too. So it was like the bars were actually up a bit higher, quite a bit comfortable. It was the start of it, right? And
wondering what could have been there after.
Yeah, wondering. Yeah. And that was it, man. I remember that transition. I went from an Elan to that would have been like an SRX, right?
Okay.
So,
those were good sleds.
Yeah. Oh man, it was great. It had like a fancy powder coated tunnel, like 141 or 136. Yeah. Oh, it was terrible, zippy. Man. Pretty zippy. Yeah.
Yeah, but not reliable.
Oh man, I've never wrenched so much in the backcountry in my entire life.
But that's why you're a good mechanic now.
Yeah.
All those pounding.
It's just destined to wrench with all my junk growing up. Yeah, no, it's man, since as far back as I can remember, sleds were a part of my life. And Pemberton that's what you did, It wasn't what it is now. Like there wasn't that much to do, but like we just rode sleds and rode bikes. Like
motorsports was a big part of growing up.
Motorsports is a big part of it, yeah.
I had a 84 Polaris Star 250, and I want to say that was a single cylinder. Single
cylinder, single carb.
Yeah.
Pretty close to an Elan, would it not?
Yeah, kind of would have been Polaris's version of it. Little 111 track or something, was small.
Yeah.
And then my dad had a 377 Safari with the twin, maybe single carb twin.
Yeah.
But then for whatever reason, the chassis went out from underneath that. He put 1 million miles on it and the chassis was no good anymore. So we actually took the 377 twin out of that and put it into my Polaris Star chassis.
Oh man.
Got rid of the 250, upgraded to a big bore.
How old were you at this stage?
I probably would have been like 10 or something.
That's amazing.
And that, like you're talking about that Skandic with the 670X, this 250 with a 377 fan cool. Well, you want to talk horsepower. That was huge.
Oh, man. I want to say that Skandic might have been Al Bush's sled. Like
he built
sled.
it.
Like, I think he built it as like this sleeper platform or something because it had like a black Skandic hood on it, man, like a 95 Skandic.
Oh, that's funny.
I think that's like, maybe black with that like dark brown look to it or something. Hey, man, you could it was hilarious.
That's so funny.
But like scary fast, all raked out too with trailing arms and like the big skid in the back. It was really good.
You've always been around motorsports for a different degree. What's the Pemberton 4x4 off-road rally you and your family always kind of entered into? And you and your brother were big into it for a few years, weren't you?
Yeah. So that
and describe the truck you took. You had a big block 460 or something for a while, didn't you?
No, it was actually a Cleveland. It was a 351 Cleveland. Yeah, the rarity, right? The one that never made it. So
those were a great engine. I mean, they had the right main size. The main journals were there.
Totally. I don't know.
Could have been there.
The heads could have been there. Yeah, there's like a few different sets of heads. We always ran the V4s because
Yeah.
we'd blow it up all the time. I don't know, man. I think just a solid roller. It was nothing crazy, like it had like well over 600 lift, and we ran a decent shot of nitrous.
And this was in what kind of a pickup?
So that was an 81 F-150.
81 F-150. This is a four-wheel drive rally where it's this like
four-wheel drive rally. So the Pemberton Rally was originally like just a 4x4 club that I believe would just kind of get together and like, head up to Braelarn and just kind of do loops. And then they got the Hydro allowed them to put on a rally in Devine, which is, outside of like Birken, Darcy. So it's like 45 minutes out of Pemberton. That rally took off like no other. You know what I mean? Like they would be nothing less than 50 trucks for like 30 plus years. And my dad raced in it for years and won he won the year I was born, so 85 and 87. So he's won twice. Way. Yeah. So cool. And my cousin Chad, he's won twice as well. So I kind of grew up, like I do remember my dad racing, but when he started fading out of it, my cousin Chad started racing. So I kind of grew up watching Chad race. So when I turned 16, my dad still had that truck.
No way.
And he still has it to date. Like so 78 Chevy, but it had a wicked big block in it. And
that was built of a 454 platform then, or 502?
It was a stroke 396, so 427.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Yeah, 427. Because it was originally, he had a 396 with an auto when he was like racing. When he was mostly using it for racing, that's what he ran. He ran a good shot, 396, standard turbo 400, a good stall. And then, so I raced that, but I raced it as a 427 4-speed truck. And
why
which was challenging.
Why'd you do that?
I don't know. I never really understood why you went back to that.
Because you were young? That's what he had in it.
It wasn't by choice, man. It was like, that was his daily driver. And so it was like, I remember when I got my license. Yeah, no joke, Mike. So he had a crummy, like what we call them crummies, but they're just like crew cab for fallers, right? So we always had there was like 4 or 5 on his falling team. And then he had the old Chevy, and that's what he used as a daily driver.
And then he would race it.
Yeah, 100%. It was just like this street truck that he'd like, and it was a street truck that he would race. That's what it was based on, right? And then, so I remember when I was like, hey, like, what do you think of me racing? He's like, well, what are you going to race? And I was like, well, I don't know. Can I race your truck? And he was
16,
like,
I have loss flying in my pockets right now. I can't afford anything.
He's like, well, I don't know. I was like, well, what do you think? And he's like, let's do it. Man, it's like that old school farmer where you ask him for like a 1/2-inch wrench, and he just like goes into the tool room or the shop that's like just every bench is covered in stuff, and he just pulls out that wrench. So he knows exactly where it is. When I said that to my old man, all of a sudden there's like
the stars align.
Literally, there's like a hood. Boom! All of a sudden there's like a cowl hood comes out, and then all of a sudden it's all the intake, so that the intake runs into the cab, and then there's all the mud flaps that he runs underneath. Like he had everything.
No
way. And then he's like, oh, we got to put the super traps on it. And it's like, what? It's like, why don't you just run the exhaust? And he's like, nah, we got to run the super traps.
You're racing. You gotta sound like you're a race truck.
It's like, he flipped the switch. But he raced, when he stopped racing the rally, he went, he raced dirt track, like stock cars him and mom raced for probably a decade.
No way.
Yeah.
That was in some sort of sportsman class, or what was that? Do you remember?
I don't even know what it was called, to tell you the truth. At that point, Mike, Pemberton didn't have they have a track now. They didn't when he raced. Yeah, he was kind of at the tail end of his racing career, we'll call it. Pemberton had flashed out then, but he raced out of Lillooet, Merritt, and Ashcroft.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Like a bunch of times.
Did he ever say what he preferred, whether it was circle track or the off-road rallies?
Oh, he loved racing side by side. Yeah, he loved. Yeah, no, I think the 4x4 rallies, it's an individual sport, we'll call it.
Timed, right?
Yeah, it's timed, and also a lot of effort for one weekend. I think once the stock car is pretty dialed, like the stock car, like they would run every weekend. They come in, change the oil, we go through like 17 air filters in a weekend.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that going to the back of the Pemberton, man, like the 4x4 rally, it was just like borderline bred India. Like it's like you grow up in Pemberton, and if you're any form of a gearhead, like you race the 4x4 rally, and that's what keeps it going too, and it's still going strong. Like I think they had a couple slow years, obviously, with everything, but they're back, man. Like they're back like 45, 50 trucks every year.
So did your brother ever win it with that 351 Cleveland?
So Andrew I used to race with my buddy Jordan for a couple of years, and then when my brother bought this truck, which it's funny, the truck's a bit iconic. That F-150 had been racing and had won the rally previous to us owning it. So my brother bought it, and it was so run down. Like it was tired.
Like anything
man.
you buy of an old race car or race truck, yeah.
And so he raced a year, maybe a year without me. And I've never felt so bad in my life, man. Because like he's my youngest brother, and he's not a mechanic. Like he's very mechanically inclined, as most of us are growing up on a farm. Like you don't have a choice. But I was like, you know what? When we moved to Fernie, and my brother moved out as well, I was like, we're racing together, and him and I just took over. I took over like the maintenance side of the truck.
Yeah.
And that was it. And we went it took us a year or two to kind of get all the kinks out of it. But so him and I, we came really close to winning in 2015. We got fourth in the road rally, second in the hill. We finished the all-terrain, and then we were having a good like close course around the all-terrain course, and the steering shaft broke.
Oh,
yeah, clipped a tree. It was pretty devastating. We were having a good weekend, which is sad. It's just like one of those things that had like the old like the rubber coupler at the bottom. Oh man, devastating. So anyways, we came back the next year like fresh, like truck painted a different color because we were convinced it was bad luck.
Everything.
Yeah, it did everything. We went through everything. We drove it for like over a month prior to the rally, and we ended up winning that year. We won. We got second in the hill. We won the mud. Cool. We got 8. Yeah, so that was really cool.
You sent me a video back then, like in 2015, of you guys doing the hill, and you're like, I don't know what it is with this truck and this engine, but as soon as you hit that shot, and it just lit up, and you sent me the video, and it was just like, yep, going. You grabbed a gear, then you hit the nitrous, and it was just like this thing just like looked like it was going to stop on the moon.
Yeah, I don't even know why you need a tack. Like it would just keep going. But if you're not familiar, because the Cleveland never really took off. Like you don't hear, they're really big in Australia, but there's what did Ford have them in that mock for a couple of years? But you don't hear of them much. But
it's funny you say that, because any gearhead listening to this will be like, oh no, everyone knows what Cleveland is.
Yeah, everyone knows. It's because we were the only ones, man. And my dad's a GM guy through and through, right? So to me, I was like, whatever. But once you get that engine apart, you start looking at it like big intake valves.
Yep.
And with a good cam, we always ran solid rollers, so there's just no BS going on up top. You get what you get. I think it just really liked the nitrous, because like all in all, I think all in all, like it wasn't a crazy horsepower. I can't remember what we dynoed out. It was like maybe like 475, 465, and it like 400 foot-pounds or something.
Yeah.
But man, I want to say it was like well over 6 with a shot. We never ran the shot on the dyno for a reason.
Well, it wouldn't last it. Yeah, that too.
But that was a cool engine, man. We went through a couple of them. But the last year we raced, which I was back here, so my brother was, he lives in just outside of Cranbrook in Marysville, and he was like, I think we should race another year. I was like, no. He's like, come on, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm
like,
okay.
I don't know, man. He's like, I'll get it ready. Will you race? I'm like, sure, sounds good. And he came down, and we we had issues, just breakdowns and little stuff. So anyways, I was like, let's just try and win the hill. And he's like, okay. I was like, what jets do you got? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, what nitrous jets you got with you? And I was like, I don't know. So I just remember going through and being like, oh, we can make a 225 shot. He's like, really? So it went from a 1.
No.
Yeah. I was like, let's just try and win it. Mike, when we got to the top, so like anyone that's run nitrous will understand this, like you do not come into a good pull with engine temperature, because that engine when it gets to the combustion temperatures increase so high.
Yep.
It doesn't take long to get to the coolant.
Yeah.
We took off at the bottom, maybe like 160, 155 degrees. That thing was 275 at the top.
You feel like 120 degrees Fahrenheit of heat on the
like
hill, and
seconds.
We have to say, like, this hill isn't like Pikes Peak. You're not doing like a 10-minute pull. It's like a power line, like, little 500 meters or something.
Like they literally pushed it out with a D8.
Yeah.
Like, okay, here it is.
Holy crap.
Oh man, it was. I think we burnt up 4 plugs that year, and then like by the time we got down, I was like, man, this thing's gonna be cooked. And got down, let it cool down, and we just start it, and it was like clunk.
Oh,
I was like, man, we ended up popping a head gasket, which I was like, oh, that sucks. The weekends by that point, we made it through the road rally. We did the hill, and I was like, it'll make it through. It'll be fine, right? Anyways, they had a truck pull that year. They're bringing back the 90s. They want to do this truck pull. It's so savage. But so you do this
what
thing.
A way to wreck a good truck.
Yeah, exactly. So we replaced the spark plugs and we find out which holes leaking coolant, but it was pretty minimal. So it was like, okay, we'll be okay. Do this truck pull, get back in. Same thing. We didn't even make it back to the pit. Just hot. I'm like, oh man, it's done. Yeah. Anyways, pull that plug out. It wasn't even that hole that gave us issues. It was the one beside it. And I remember taking my borescope. I had my shop truck there. Taking my borescope and looking in, and we spun it over, and I could see the connecting rod. I was like,
from the top end of the engine.
Yeah, from the top. I was like, oh.
Typically,
man.
for viewers, if you can imagine what we're talking about, you would normally see the top of a piston.
You should see a piston,
and it would be discolored from the combustion
it should all
and everything.
Be there. Yeah, a little bit of black. That's a good sign. Really, if it's a two-stroke, it might be a little golden touch. But it was pretty funny. We're just like, oh man. I was like, why do we do this?
Hard on things.
My old man's just like, he's so funny. He's like, just drain the coolant out of it and just fill the gas full of ATF. I was like, really? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, you just got to make it. Like the all-terrain course is like 3 minutes. You'll be fine.
Oh my.
So this is what we, this is what we do. We're like, well, the race engine's toast. Like it's done, right? Like there's no way around it. I'm like, well, let's just do what he says. So we got an engine that won't hold coolant. It's literally like down 2 holes, and we go out, blow a U-joint.
No, of all the things.
All the things. I was like, man, yeah. I think we sold the truck for like $5,000 with like all the parts and stuff.
Just
I was like, just take it. Yeah.
Oh.
Which I think there's actually a kid outside of Williams Lake that bought it. I haven't seen it yet, but there is talk that he's coming around. So
that's cool. Yeah, it'd be cool to see it racing again. Yeah. I'd come out there and film it for sure.
Yeah.
So in sledding, how does this kind of chaoticness translate in your family? Like, did anyone else get the bug in sledding from all these things that you guys did growing up?
You know what, man? Like, my middle brother, he had a sled for a couple of years, but he just didn't really, like, I won't say commit to the sport like I did, but it didn't really transition. Like, that just wasn't his thing, right? Yeah. Where all 3 of us, man, can ride. Like, they still, like, Andrew and Kenny can get on a sled and, like, still get around, like, quite well. Like, it was just, I think, I say it's just from having junk sleds. Like, we never had good stuff. Like, you're always getting around. Like, we had a Tundra for a bit.
Fighting hard to get anywhere.
Yeah, you're working hard, man. You're working really hard. And, it's, it's like we're all pretty motorsports based. Like, handlebars that was just what you did, man.
So you get to ride the odd demo through Andrew.
Yeah.
And what beyond that, like, what do you think your future is going to be? You think you're going to get back into sledding in a bigger way, or like, what do you think? You got the itch for it?
Go, man. You know what, man? I can scratch it pretty easily. I pick my days. I pick a crew too. Like, if I get invited, I usually get pretty excited, right? Like, oh, cool. Like last year, Cody and I went out, McNulty and I, and just took a couple of his sleds, and it was like I hadn't been on any turbo sled like that in my life. It was like, I cannot believe that anybody can roll into a dealership
and just buy that
and buy this. Like, there's no skill test, there's no anything required. You can just get on this mod sled and ride it. Like, so
it's a weapon.
It's a weapon, man. But going forward, man, like, I've kind of told myself that keep going, keep riding a bit, like, keep it fresh, enjoy it, man.
Is that the biggest thing for you? Is just making sure you're in the right crew?
Yeah, right crew, fair weather, man. And also, I enjoy going back to my stomping ground. I enjoy going back to Pemberton, just trying to piece together some old stuff, man. Old jumps, like, it's still good. Like home, man. It feels good, man. It feels really good. I don't need to, go grab a sled and then, like, pin it back to Squamish or pin it back to Whistler and, like, be the first guy at the parking lot to try and get the freshest lines. Like, that's not what I'm into anymore, man.
Do you see that as, like, the Carmichaels or Tomacs or whoever's, that's going to be retired in their moto career? Do you think maybe they have that same thing where it's just like, listen, I don't want the most kitted out race trim 450, but I want something with some power, and go back to my old track in wherever that was where they grew up and just session that table or that triple session,
I hope so. I love the reference though, using like the best in the world. So I hope so,
I
man.
should
I
be
think
like relating you to McGrath or something like that.
Yeah,
We're going
right.
McGrath. Like that's who you could be.
72 Supercross. Like, yeah. I hope so, man. I think that's, there's no way that you can ever fall out of love with something that has been and is a big part of your life and also who you are. Sledding was a big part of my life. And it honestly, at times, it's like I still kind of feel like it is who I am deep down, and I am a snowmobiler, and I will always be around, whether to remind myself or maybe even social media that like, hey, I'm still here.
That's right.
If my kid gets into it, this is kind of where I'm at. If my son decides he wants to snowmobile, again, I'm in, that's kind of what I feel my return will be. And also when he gets to an age where it's like, you got 3 days, you got 2 days, I don't want to be gone for 12 hours, and time becomes very valuable as we all know. And once you get to a certain time where I find with dirt biking and bike sports and things like that, you can have a great time with 2-3 hours and continue on, or time is more available when you're not snowmobiling.
Snowmobiling is a big commitment for time.
It's a commitment,
and like maybe not where you're at as much as some other areas, because you guys are a little bit spoiled in the sea to sky, where you don't have to travel crazy to like 2-3 hours. Like you could easily do like a half day ride. Like a lot of people do that in Revelstoke too, where it's just like, you want to go Boulder in the afternoon, work in the morning, like you can do that. Kind of same thing. That's true. Sky.
Yeah, that's true. It's
nicer, but still snowmobiling. If you're putting in a full day sledding, like what we used to do, where it was this like, I'm going to drive through this snowstorm till 2 a.m. I'm going to stop in Cache Creek at this motel, grab a quick 4 hours of sleep. I'm going to meet you and Grant Clark at like this coffee shop, and then we're going to go straight up and start filming. And it was just like, that's what
some of those drives are so sporty, man. I think back to that first time you came down, like we had never met, and that was really my first big year filming. And like, Yurley and I and Grant and KJ and Dan, like we had the time. I wasn't working. I took the winter off. Time you had nothing but, so you could just exactly do that, go out for a few hours, and like, even if you didn't find something, it wasn't a waste of time.
Right.
It was just, you'd always grab something. But like, you rolling into town after this mission, you're just like, oh man, like we gotta get some stuff together. Like we gotta do this. I think I did now.
And that day, there's still Slednecks reposted some of that.
Yeah, not that long ago.
On profile above within the clouds. It wasn't even above the clouds. It was kind of within the clouds, backlit. And you just like stepped down off of this thing into like no man's land. You went huge.
That was huge. Yeah, kind of the back. You looking back at Black Tusk. Yeah, that was good, man. That was a deep day too.
Super
but I remember there was that good group of snowboarders down below, kind of filming something like almost below you. Yeah. And I was looping. I was like, man, Mike, I think this will work. But I didn't I legitimately landed on like a transition below the transition I wanted to land on. I remember just leaving and just like being like, oh man.
Well, because the lip and then it rolled and then it went down a long hill. And it was basically like, if you're willing to hit this, you could go as big as you want. Like you could go to the basement. And it was just like carry some speed into it.
Yeah, the bounce was like to the friggin' basement, man. It was like, that was good.
You get fired up in those instances.
Oh, dude, totally. It's like that's what I miss. I miss that, like, wow, I just pulled that off.
Yeah. Well, that or like the time we formed up that jumping over the Grizzly Lodge.
Oh man. You remember rolling in there and like you and I and Brett all like kind of circled the lodge being like, we can't jump it. It's like the first we jumped beside it. We didn't jump over it. We were trying
The way I filmed it looked like you jumped right over the whole thing.
Like it instantly came to mind, like, we're gonna jump this lodge.
Yeah.
That was my first day riding with Brett.
That
was my introduction to Turcotte, and just like tunnel full of like bags and fuel, like everything. Like we're going for the weekend, and like he's doing like 6-0 down the trail and just hits this pillow off the side of the trail, and like his and Jess's stuff just like blows.
It's chaotic. I remember leaving from that trip, and he needed, there was something about a truck, or you and McBride and I think went one direction, and he had to go back, and I was like, well, get my truck back to Kamloops for me. And I was just like, but the only deal is you can't drive it. And he left the parking lot like in some rental truck or something with like the gas to the floor bounced off the rev limiter. And I was like, that is exactly why I didn't let him drive my truck.
Remember when he bent 2 skids?
Okay, this one's screwed. Grab me another one, quick, from another M series. Like, okay.
Oh,
I'm not
man.
donating mine, but take one of the other sleds from Grizzly, I guess. Adam, he put up with a lot, I think, for a while.
Yeah, you did, man. Yeah. Derek Wood, remember we had Night Cruiser?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
So good.
those were a
What
good
an- oh,
era
man.
for sure. It was a
That
good
was a
crew.
good era,
And I think there are
yeah.
good crews like that still today that are,
For sure.
on the
think
West
people
Coast and
have
the
as-
Central BC.
yeah.
It's cool to see.
I hope they have half as much fun as we did, man. Like I think back to that, and like that was my intro to Derek too. And I'm just like, and Derek and I are still good friends.
Yeah,
man.
he's
Like,
a good dude. Anytime
he's a
I'm
good
in the
dude.
same
It's
town as him,
such
I
a
always look him
weapon,
up
man.
and see if we can
Yeah.
hang out because it's a
Yeah.
laugh.
Yeah.
Those were a lot of fun. And just imagine if you were on the turbo sleds today that the kids get to ride. It's just like that would just been another level.
Yeah. I continue to threaten. You know, it's one of those things you got to. Maybe we'll see. I was chirping the other day with Aaron, like, you know what? Maybe I come back for my 40th.
Yes.
Eh?
Well, okay. Here's the challenge to you. Next time I'm out on the West Coast, we'll bug McBride. We'll get on some sort of turbo or
Not a
9R or something
problem.
chaos.
Not a problem.
And we're gonna I'm gonna get some shots of you, and then the whole world is gonna see that you still got it.
Yeah, still got it. Yeah, probably still got the same sled gear. It'd be like I never left. You know? Yeah.
Hold on, is this 2013 or
Yeah,
are we like 10 years later?
ISO clothing and apparel.
You're gonna do it, buddy. It's gonna happen.
Oh man, don't threaten me with a good time.
Okay, buddy. Well, thanks so much for hopping on this podcast.
man,
I really
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Yeah, it was fun, Mike. Good to talk to you.